Have you guys ever heard of an individual named Joseph Kony, otherwise known as the guy who everybody used to post about in 2012, where they literally said Kony 2012 or someone go find Kony or something along those lines? This guy was a sicko from Uganda who the United States was after. And this is a pretty good leeway into the different stories in the Central African Republic, even though he is from Uganda. Trust me, just hear me out. I will explain the whole thing. Now, Joseph Kony, he killed at least 10,000 people, abducted and enslaved 24,000 people, mostly kids, and displaced 2 million people between 1986 and 2009-ish. He was a serial killer starting at the age of 25. Anyway, his affairs bled into the Central African Republic, and the US was by default there searching for him. While searching for him, the United States had about 50 special operations missions against this guy, and many of which were in the Central African Republic. The budget is a little skewed, but more than likely the budget for finding this guy was probably around 50 million. He came into the Central African Republic due to the weak government and the ability to be able to mobilize freely in that area. Okay, all while this was going down, from 2012 to 2014, the United States actually stopped its embassy operations in the Central African Republic because of the fact that there was a literal coup that was going on. Then in 2014, the US supported the United Nations with a peacekeeping mission with 12,000 peacekeepers, which eventually now it's 14,000, but at the time it was 12,000 back in 2014. The point was to assist the transition process between the old president and the new president, to support the return of security and stability, and to provide needed humanitarian and development assistance. The mission was authorized through November 2018. 3 years later, after the plan was created, the US actually abandoned their effort to find Kony due to a little security concern that he reportedly held. He only had about 100 fighters. It does bring up a lot of questions of, well, if he had 24,000 fighters, mostly kids, and displaced 2 million, and now he has 100, is there a likelihood that he's just going to build that army back up? I don't know the nuances, and I don't think a lot of people really do because it's not publicly available information, but something to consider. Anyway, the question of that moment was, okay, if they're suspending their operations militarily in this area, then what are they going to do to be able to help people in the Central African Republic? Well, fortunately, they actually stepped up their humanitarian efforts. Now, according to the US Department of State, quote, over the past 2 years, so this was in 2018 and 2017, the United States has provided over 300 million humanitarian development and security assistance in support of the Central African Republic people's efforts to find long-term stability and peace. That's cool. Right after they stopped military operations, to kind of summarize that, they actually began donating $300 million to be able to help the Central African Republic. This is actually the most that any country in the world was donating towards this cause. With that funding, what we do know are a handful of different programs that were created by US aid in order to be able to help the situations there. Mostly the programs focused on helping this country mine different resources like diamond, gold, and uranium. In addition to that too, some of these programs were trying to help the peace building process. But the only thing that I'll offer to you guys right now are two different factors. Number one, what kind of preconditions were tied to this aid? A lot of times when we give aid to different countries, there are a lot of different conditions, which is called tied aid. For example, hey, we're going to give you all this money, but you also have to purchase your equipment from US manufacturers. One really typical example is a lot of times they will tie specific manufacturers, which in hindsight, I kind of wonder if this is some form of corruption or not, but a lot of times they'll say, hey, you guys will get $50 million, but you also have to buy 30,000 John Deere tractors. With this particular situation, we don't really know what kind of tied aid was associated in this situation. What we do know is that there's probably some sort of preconditions here or there. That's factor number one. Factor number two, we have to remember the fact that literally 75% of the country is lawless. Who is benefiting from all this mining of gold and diamonds and uranium? That's the question we should be asking ourselves. Is it just the government? Is there anybody else tied to it? What about the people who live in 75% of the rest of the country. Are they benefiting? Probably not. And so how is this helping the general population, or is this more of a business agreement? I only bring all this stuff up because I want to let you guys know the truth of the situation, which is that it seems to be a mutually beneficial relationship. Granted, the United States is giving way more money than they're probably receiving, but it's not as charitable as what you may originally think. It's not like we're just handing them a bunch of money and then just calling it good. I do not offer you guys a solution in this case. However, what I will say is that considering that most of us have not heard of this place before, maybe sharing a story and letting people know that these problems exist in this country that does in fact also exist might be a good step forward. So if you'd like to share some of my fun facts or some of the sources, again, check the description box below because I have everything there. Sharing some of these stories might help bring to light and shed some understanding of how we're going to solve this issue globally.